Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. We're starting off with a story every employee will understand. A massive image processing project was supposed to help the entire organization, neatly labeled photos, accessible archives, everything running smoothly. But one supervisor, desperate to flex control, ordered the project to only be done in a tiny sliver of time each day. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like and subscribe with a turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. She wanted control, not results, and it cost her the job. I was working at an organization where part of my job was organizing thousands of high-quality photos of students' artwork from the main computer I worked on and transferring them to a network server. The whole purpose was to make these images accessible to other staff, especially those who needed them for presentations, archival purposes, exhibitions, donor materials, you name it. The process should have been straightforward, but doing it correctly took time. Yes, the Photoshop batch processing to create medium-resolution JPEGs from the massive high-res files was easy. Click a button, boom, hundreds done. But the hard part, the time-eating, eye-watering part, was labeling each image individually with specific details. Artist name, title of the work, medium, dimensions, year, program, and anything else the department needed. One mislabeled image could cause headaches down the line. My department manager knew this was important. They were the one who emphasized that this project was a priority because multiple teams relied on those labeled files being complete and accurate. Then came my new-ish supervisor. Let's call her Karen, because of course. Karen was a micromanager of Olympic caliber. She didn't actually understand what my job required, but she had opinions about absolutely everything. One day she hovered over my desk and said, "Why are you spending so much time on this project? I only want you to work on this task in the last 30 minutes of your shift." I paused. I genuinely thought she must have misunderstood something. I explained that this project was perfect to work on during slower moments. Some days I had long stretches where other tasks were finished early and I could make real progress on the image database. Telling me to cram it into the last half hour was not only inefficient, it meant the project would drag on for months unnecessarily. "Nope," she said, cutting me off. "Just do it in the last 30 minutes of your shift." I stared at her for a moment, realized arguing with her was pointless, and said, "Okay, you got it." Cue malicious compliance. After that, whenever I had those perfectly good slow periods during the day, I didn't touch the image project. I couldn't. Karen had given explicit instructions, and I wasn't about to get reprimanded for ignoring her mandate. So I did what any employee stuck under a micromanager does. I invented ways to look busy. There were days where the only thing on my plate was that image task. Days where I could have processed hundreds of files, knocked out labeling, made huge progress. Instead, I sat there clicking around meaninglessly, organizing already organized folders or walking around campus with a clipboard pretending to check things. I became a master at productive loitering. Meanwhile, the project crawled forward at a snail's pace, 30 minutes at the very end of each shift every day and nothing more. Months went by. Then one afternoon, my department manager called me, and they did not sound happy. "Why hasn't this project been completed yet?" I didn't even hesitate. I've been specifically instructed by Karen not to spend any time on this task except for the last 30 minutes of my shift. There was a long, pointed silence on the other end. I see. Karen didn't last much longer with the organization after that. Turns out micromanaging is one thing, but micromanaging in a way that tanks productivity and directly contradicts departmental priorities? That'll do it. And the project finished pretty quickly once she was gone. Having read many, many delicious posts, such as this one, I feel that all managers should be required to watch this story. Of course, it might only result in stupid managers learning to craft stupid rules that are more difficult for malicious compliance. I really don't know the answer here. And our second story. She told me her plan to slowly remove the brush pile from my yard. I had a faster plan. A month ago, my neighbor had her giant spruces trimmed. And when I say giant, I mean the type of tree you could probably hide a small car under. A few days later, I went outside to take out my garbage, and that's when I saw it. A 6-foot-high wall of brush jammed up against my back fence, from the ground all the way to the top of my 6-foot panels, bulging outward toward the road like it wanted to roll away. Huge branches, thick limbs, piles and piles of pine needles. Honestly, it looked like someone had dropped half the forest directly onto my property line. I stood there just staring at it, trying to figure out how she thought this placement made sense. It wasn't just a branch or two that fell over after trimming. It was a full construction site mound of debris deliberately stacked along the fence that separates our yards. So I texted her and asked what her disposal plans were. She responded cheerfully that she planned to move it gradually, as if this giant decomposing mountain of kindling belonged in my line of sight indefinitely. I told her that was not okay and that I wanted it gone as soon as possible. 2 weeks went by, nothing changed. The pile didn't shrink, it didn't move. If anything, the wind was pulling loose needles into my yard like a sad evergreen blizzard. Meanwhile, this woman already uses a section of space against my house to store random bits of junk, old boards, broken plant pots, miscellaneous trash, all without ever asking. So this wasn't new behavior, just an escalation. I texted again, far less politely, and told her my yard was not free storage and she needed to deal with her mess. Fast forward to today. We've had unseasonably warm weather for weeks, the kind of strange Canadian winter that tricks you into thinking spring is close. But today it dropped to -20. And despite the temperature shift, the one thing that absolutely had not shifted was her giant pile of brush. I drove home at lunch, looked at the heap still frozen solid against my fence, now stuffed with snow and God knows how many mice hiding inside, and I snapped. I'd reached my limit. I put on gloves, marched outside, and started hauling every single branch off my property. And not gently either. I grabbed each piece and chucked it over onto her tiny parking pad, the one where she keeps her garbage bins. If she wanted to store her debris gradually, she could store it gradually on her own property. The thuds were loud and extremely satisfying. By the time I was done, my fence line was clear and her parking pad looked like a lumberjack had exploded on it. I walked back inside, fully expecting an angry barrage of texts. Silence, not a word. Later, while we were both doing yard work, she wandered over and started chatting as if absolutely nothing had happened. No greeting about the brush, no acknowledgement, nothing. She acted like this was just a normal neighborly conversation and I hadn't just returned half a forest to her doorstep. When I told her plainly that I put the branches back onto her property, she barely reacted, just nodding and kept talking. Then she hit me with this gem. "Can I use your green bin to help get rid of it? It'll go faster." I stared. My green bin, which I intentionally keep empty except for dog poop bags and occasional yard clippings, she wanted to use my bin to speed up the cleanup of her mess? Absolutely not. I told her no, that I keep my bin in my yard for my own needs, and that's all there is to it. Her response? "Well, if I see your bin out and it's not full, I'll just put some brush in it." The audacity, the Olympic-level entitlement. It was like she genuinely believed she had a right to my property and my resources just because she didn't feel like dealing with the consequences of her own choices. I told her again very clearly that she is not to use my bin under any circumstances. She shrugged, that dismissive little shrug people do when they've already decided they're going to ignore everything you just said, and walked away. So now we're at the waiting stage. She hasn't tried anything yet, but if she dumps a single twig into my bin, I will happily roll it right back over and empty every last bit onto her driveway. If she wants to do her cleanup gradually, she can take full ownership of the gradual part, using her bin, her space, and her effort. Some people think property lines apply only when convenient. Some people think your yard's just an extension of theirs. And some people really believe a polite boundary is a suggestion instead of a rule. She's about to learn differently. And our next story. How a missing tool triggered a household meltdown. My dad's never been good at keeping things organized. Not when he was younger, not when he hit middle age, not now. The man simply does not possess the place for everything and everything in its place gene. And it wouldn't be so bad if he could at least leave things alone when he can't find something. But no, when he misplaces a tool, even when it's something he doesn't need urgently, he panics like the house is on fire and immediately begins tearing the entire place apart. I'm not exaggerating when I say this. More than 5 times he's completely destroyed hours of careful organization because he was convinced the missing item had to be under whatever neat pile, labeled container, or carefully sorted toolbox I just finished arranging. And when he takes it upon himself to organize, he declares war on anything that still has a sense of order. He'll pick up organized containers, dump things out, mix unrelated items together, rethink the system, and then forget where he put everything away. The result, I spend half my time hunting for tools I know we already own and the other half caving and buying replacements because my dad has disappeared them into some mysterious void. It's gotten so ridiculous that any tools I really care about, the good ones, the expensive ones, the sentimental ones, now live in my closet behind a door with a lock, the only safe zone left in the house. Enter my brother Tim. Tim recently moved back in, and shortly before his arrival, Dad did his annual ritual organizing the garage, which really meant rearranging things in a way that only made sense to him, mixing up parts from 7 unrelated projects, and stacking things in perilous, physics-defying towers. But Tim? Well, Tim is absolutely my father's son. Within days of moving in, Tim took one look at the garage and decided he needed to reorganize it. Not in any way that could be described as rational or intuitive. No, he reorganized it Dad style, which is to say chaotically, randomly, and with total disregard for where anything has been before. He simply scrambled Dad's system and replaced it with a different brand of disorder. Then one afternoon, Dad went looking for a tool, couldn't find it, panicked, and immediately deorganized Tim's organization. And just like that, we entered a new era of family history. The Great Garage War of 2025. Now Dad and Tim are locked in an endless loop, each reorganizing the other's organization, each undoing whatever progress the other tried to make, both swearing their system makes perfect sense if the other would just stop messing with things. Meanwhile, the garage looks like it's being constantly raided by raccoons. Neither of them can find a single thing anymore. They blame each other, the garage, the universe, gravity, everything except their mutual inability to leave anything where they put it. And me? I'm the only one in the house who can reliably locate a screwdriver or a socket wrench because mine are safely locked away in my closet where neither of them can touch them, reorganize them, lose them, or launch them into the abyss. Honestly, it's the only path to sanity. Sometimes petty revenge is passive, simple, and deeply satisfying. Just don't share your tools with the men in your family who are constitutionally incapable of respecting order. I sleep better knowing my Allen wrenches are safe. I hope you enjoy your popcorn as they go back and forth blaming each other forever. Keep your earplugs handy for when they try to beg to use your tools for just a quick little job, because you'll never see them again if you give in. And our last story. A trespassing Karen told me I had no authority on my own property. I told her I was a lawyer. I live on a quiet piece of riverfront property tucked far off the main road. The only people who ever come down our private gravel lane are the UPS driver and my neighbor Bill. He has no river access of his own, so I've always let him and his kids walk across my yard to launch their raft. I like the guy. He's respectful, quick, and always checks in before crossing. No issue whatsoever. Then one afternoon, a strange car rolls up and parks directly in front of my house. This is unheard of. A bunch of kids around 8 or 9 pile out, along with a teen who clearly wants to be anywhere else, and a woman who looks like she hasn't been told no, like never. Before I can even process what I'm seeing, they beeline across my perfectly maintained backyard, hauling tubes, baskets, and towels. At first, I assume maybe someone else from the car is driving them further down the road to start a float. Rude, but possible. But then they plop down a blanket, scatter their toys, and the kids start tearing around my yard. That's when I walk out and ask what exactly they think they're doing. I tell her plainly that this is private property. She snaps back with a Karen's tone. Actually, this is public river access. It takes me a second to process the audacity. I remind her that she is, in fact, sitting in my backyard. No trespassing signs included. She insists, even louder, that she's in the right because she knows this is public land. Meanwhile, the teen's giving me a mortified look that says he wants to dissolve into the river and drift away forever. As we argue, one of her kids starts digging up one of my sprinkler heads. When I tell him to stop, Karen loses it. According to her, I can't talk to her children, and I have no authority here. She tries to justify everything by insisting that Bill, my neighbor, puts in his raft here, so that makes it public. I explain again that Bill puts in here because I allow him to. She is not Bill. I do not know her. She does not have permission to do anything here, let alone vandalize my lawn with her offspring. She refuses to leave, so finally I tell her she needs to go before I call the sheriff. She gets inches from my face and sneers that the sheriff will explain I have no right to force her off a navigable waterway access point. If she wants to play armchair attorney, fine. I tell her I'm a lawyer, and she has absolutely no clue what she's talking about, but she's currently trespassing, which is very easy to prove, very illegal, and very much something I can press charges for. I practice corporate antitrust law, not criminal, but she doesn't need to know that. What I do know is exactly where my property line is and exactly how far she's crossed it. That finally shuts her down. She storms off while announcing that Bill will hear about this, that she'll report me to the HOA, we don't have one, and that she'll be filing a complaint somewhere. She doesn't specify where, based on her level of logic, probably Yelp. Later I talk to Bill. Turns out the woman is his friend's ex-wife. The teen's a friend of his daughter who was stuck going rafting with them. And apparently this isn't her first meltdown. Among other things, she once tried to get a ranch shut down near her new house because the horses were too loud. Oh, and the best part is when I pointed to the clearly marked boundary posts of my property earlier and told her she could leave that way, she actually said that the overgrown area wasn't fun and her kids liked the yard better. They liked my yard, so in her mind, they owned it. Once she realized she couldn't bluff you, she folded immediately and started inventing imaginary authority she could report you to. People like her rely on neighbors being too polite or too uncertain to stand firm. You weren't either of those things, and the ending says it all. She admitted your yard was better and acted like that made her entitled to it. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.